Greetings, fellow ukuleleans. Jeff Weinberger coming at you here with a new tutorial. Today I'd like to talk about Bob Dylan's strums. There's a whole heck of a lot of them. He has a long career. He's still going strong. But I'd like to focus probably on his very earliest period, his acoustic folk period before he went electric, before that mid-60s, 65, 66 period where he transformed from a kind of a protest songwriter and a ballad writer and a devotee of Woody Guthrie, and he was kind of more of a folky for the first part of his career. And then he morphed into something else as everything was changing. The cultural landscape was changing, America was changing, everything was changing. It was the times they were changing, but the mid-60s were a really pivotal moment for Dylan. And also he had a motorcycle accident, and he ended up going to Woodstock, New York, and living secluded, and didn't tour, didn't record for a little while, and then when he came back, did some of, in my opinion, his best work. But that was a little bit different. That sort of strumming that he did on his guitar started to transform a little bit. His finger picking, his chord choices, he really changed. But his early stuff is what we're talking about today. So enough with the history. Let's get right into the strums. There are only so many of them that we don't have to really talk about like 10 or 20 different strums. Let's key in on just the most basic Bob Dylan strums that you need to play his music. That song I was playing at the top, that was Mr. Tambourine Man, and that's a good example of a classic Bob Dylan strum. It's basically down, 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 up, down, up. But on his guitar, he used a pick when he strummed that, and he was picking the strings closest to him on the guitar. That's E, A, D, G, B, E. He was kind of strumming his E, A, and maybe even his D strings. But then in the next stroke, the subsequent stroke after that on beat 2, he strummed the higher strings on his guitar, the G, B, and E strings. Well, on the ukulele, we only have 4 strings, but we can do just about that same thing. And we can use our thumb rather than a pick. Although if you play ukulele with a pick, you could do this easily. It would sound very guitar-like, but I'm going to use my thumb because most of us use our thumb when we strum. So you hit maybe your G and possibly your C strings on the first beat. Hit maybe your E and possibly your A strings, and if you hit more than that, that's okay, on the second beat. And then on the down, up, the 3 and 4 and part of the measure, just strum down, up, and don't really worry too much about which strings you're hitting. Maybe go for all of them. Very Dylan-like, very early folk. Peter, Paul, and Mary used some of these same strums. Joan Baez did. All the singers of the day that were considered folk artists kind of had this repertoire of strums. So we're talking about Bob Dylan strums, but we're kind of talking about a lot of different folk strums in this same tutorial without me going into those other artists. So if you're not using your thumb, of course you can use your index, and that's going to give you a brighter sound, a little more like a guitar pick. You're using the nail, so it's a harder surface, it's brighter, it's louder, more aggressive, and it's perfect. That to me is the ultimate sound for a song like Mr. Tambourine Man, to capture that early 60s folk vibe. So Dylan came out with his first album in '62, and then after that he became very popular. His first album was mostly covers. It was mostly folk songs that he hadn't written, but by '63 he was writing, and '64 he was writing, and became known as one of the best songwriters of all time, especially greatest American songwriters of all time. And that's the period we're kind of focusing on, is the '62, '63, and maybe even getting into the '64 period. So let's talk about what I'm doing there again. I'm hitting the closer strings, whichever ones, however many you happen to hit, on a down. I'm hitting the further away strings on a down. And then I'm doing a quick down, up on however many, but most of the strings, if not all of them. I always say this, I always stress that, but it's true. You're not really being very nitpicky. You're not really trying to do this like with a microscope and get exactly everything. You know, just go for a general sound. If yours sounds something like that, you're doing fine. Don't worry about the number of strings you're hitting. It's the general idea and the general sound. Alright, so that's Mr. Tambourine Man, down, 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 up, down, up. He uses that strum in a lot of his songs. There's others like Hard Rain, there's I Want You, there's Shelter from the Storm, there's a whole bunch of them, Blowing in the Wind, Girl from North Country. We're going to talk about a lot of these songs. So there's a variation of that strum. It's the same strum, but you take one of them away. He used that a lot. And he used it in combination with the first strum that we did. Because they're so similar, you can kind of alternate between the two. So that's down, down, wait, up, down, down, wait, up, down, up. You can wait, or you can do what I call the faked strum, which I've explained in other videos, but it's where you make the motion of a down strum without actually hitting your strings. You do this in order to get your hand down here and more easily and most gracefully come back up. And so I use the faked strum method almost always, but I do explain to students that you can do the wait method too, where you're just waiting. You just have your hand waiting to do that next up strum. But I prefer the faked strum that brings your hand down below the ukulele so that it can more easily come back up. So here it is in action. So that's exactly the strum he does in the song I Want You. And then that's the strum he does a lot in Mr. Tambourine Man, Times They Are A-Changin', Blowin' in the Wind, etc. As maybe like the second measure. The first measure might be the full down, 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 up that I explained first. And then the second measure might be this down, down, fake up, down, up. So put them together and you get this. Here's strum number 1, followed by strum number 2. I'll do it a few times.